5 days before our anniversary, I overheard Opal laughing with her friends over dinner. I hadn't planned to listen, but as I approached the restaurant with the bouquet of her favorite lilies in my hand, her voice sliced through the air like a blade. "He's just a placeholder," she said, swirling her wine. "A stable option until Michael fully commits." The words punched through my chest. Her friends giggled, raising their glasses in approval. "You're smart, Opal. Why settle when you can aim higher?" I stood frozen behind the frosted glass wall, my reflection staring back at me. A man who had invested 4 years of his life, only to be reduced to a temporary convenience. The ring in my pocket suddenly felt heavy, like a weight chained to my pride. I had planned to propose tonight. She had chosen this exact restaurant years ago, calling it her dream engagement spot. Now I realized it was all part of her carefully curated image. I quietly turned around and walked away before anyone noticed. That night, I didn't sleep. Her words looped in my head relentlessly, each repetition more bitter than the last. A placeholder. That's all I was to her. The next morning, as she texted me casual good mornings with heart emojis, I smiled bitterly at my phone. She didn't know I had heard everything. She didn't know I had already begun erasing her from my life. By noon, I contacted my lawyer. "Thomas, are you sure about this?" he asked after reviewing the revised documents. "Absolutely," I replied, my voice cold and firm. "Remove Opal from the will. Replace her name with Bailey." "Bailey? Your dog?" "Yes. At least Bailey has never pretended to love me for convenience." The lawyer paused briefly before nodding. "Understood." As I signed the papers, a strange calmness settled over me. The woman I once adored had destroyed any illusion of love between us. But I wouldn't confront her, not yet. I wanted her to see what real consequences felt like, and soon she would. Opal wasn't someone I stumbled upon accidentally. I met her 4 years ago at a charity gala hosted by one of my firm's biggest clients. Amid the sea of polished faces and empty conversations, she stood out effortlessly. Her laughter was melodic, her confidence magnetic. Every eye in the room gravitated toward her, but somehow her gaze found me. At the time, I wasn't used to attention like hers. My world revolved around spreadsheets, boardrooms, and quiet evenings with Bailey, my golden retriever. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room, nor the flashiest presence. But Opal saw something, or at least she pretended to. That night, she approached me with a glass of champagne, her smile radiating warmth. "You don't look like you belong here," she teased. "Neither do you," I replied, managing a smile. That was how it started. Simple. Unassuming. But behind her charming facade was someone calculating, someone who recognized stability when she saw it. My rising status in finance, my expanding assets, and my cautious nature offered her everything she needed, a reliable future. Within months, we were inseparable. Dinners at 5-star restaurants, weekend getaways, spontaneous shopping sprees, everything felt like a whirlwind romance. My friends often said I was lucky. At times, I believed them. Opal had a way of making you feel like the center of her universe, but only when it suited her. She never officially moved in, though most of her belongings occupied my closet space. She called it maintaining independence. I interpreted it as her attempt to avoid full commitment. Still, I dismissed my concerns. She was career-driven, ambitious, and I admired that. For 4 years, I planned everything around her. Every promotion I earned, every investment I made, every plan for the future. I included her in all of it. My parents, initially skeptical, slowly warmed up to her. Even Bailey adored her, often curling up at her feet as we watched movies in the living room. But over time, cracks formed. It began subtly. Her frequent late-night meetings, sudden business, trips, and vague explanations about her whereabouts. Whenever I questioned her, she would tilt her head, flash that disarming smile, and say, "Thomas, you worry too much." I wanted to believe her. I chose to believe her. Then came Michael. I first heard his name during one of her many work events. Michael, A luxury real estate developer known for his charm and wealth seemed to orbit around her constantly. She insisted they were merely acquaintances, professional contacts helping each other climb the social ladder. I tried to trust her, but deep down, unease brewed. 2 months ago, Opal started suggesting joint investments, properties, vacation homes, even art collections. She claimed it was about building our legacy. I took it as a sign of progress, a step toward the future I envisioned with her. Looking back, I was naive. The turning point arrived 5 days before our anniversary, the night I overheard her conversation with her friends. That single sentence, "He's just a placeholder," shattered everything I had built in my mind. I stood in silence outside that restaurant, invisible as my world crumbled. All the moments we shared, the sacrifices I made, the plans I had envisioned, they meant nothing to her. I wasn't a partner. I was a stepping stone until Michael offered something better. That night, I returned home to our apartment, greeted by the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. Bailey wagged his tail, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I sank into the leather armchair, staring blankly at the ring box resting on the coffee table. The engagement ring I had spent months choosing now felt like an insult to my own dignity. The next morning, Opal greeted me with her usual charm. She kissed my cheek, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "Happy almost anniversary. I have something special planned." I smiled, masking the bitter taste in my mouth. She had no idea her carefully woven facade was unraveling. As she left for her supposed design consultation, I called my lawyer. "Thomas, this is a serious decision," he warned after hearing my instructions. "I've made up my mind." We spent the entire afternoon revising my will, my asset distribution plans, and every legal document that once included her name. I ensured that Bailey, my loyal companion, became my sole beneficiary. When I signed the final papers, I felt no sadness, only a cold, steady resolve. Opal would get her special anniversary, just not the one she expected. The next evening, Opal returned home earlier than usual. She entered the apartment carrying a shopping bag from one of the luxury brands she adored. Bailey ran to her, tail wagging as always, completely oblivious to the weight in the air. She crouched down to pet him, laughing softly. "Bailey, I got you a little something too," she said, pulling out a silk bandana embroidered with his name. I watched her carefully from the kitchen, noting the flawless performance she put on. Her smile was bright, her tone light, as if nothing in her world could possibly be wrong. "I thought we could have dinner together tonight," she said, placing the bag on the counter. Michael suggested this new fusion place that just opened. He says the chef trained in Japan and France. Perfect for our anniversary week, don't you think? Michael. Again. She dropped his name so casually now, as if testing me, gauging how much she could reveal without crossing any visible line. My stomach twisted, but my face remained still. "Sure," I said quietly. "Whatever you want." She beamed, walking over to me and slipping her arms around my waist. "You're the best, Thomas." I wrapped my arms around her out of habit, but my mind was far from the warmth of her embrace. Later that night, as we sat across from each other at the restaurant she had chosen, Opal scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. Between sips of expensive wine and brief glances at her messages, she maintained a shallow conversation, pretending everything was perfect. At one point, her phone lit up again. Michael's name flashed across the screen. She saw me glance at it, quickly flipping the phone face down and offering a nervous smile. "Just some work stuff," she said. I nodded, not bothering to ask. As dinner ended, we stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights flickered around us, and for a moment I stared at her silhouette under the soft glow of the street lamp. This was the woman I had loved for years. And yet, at this moment, she felt like a complete stranger. She slipped her hand into mine. "I can't wait for what you have planned for our anniversary," she said, her voice laced with excitement. I know you've been working on something special. I looked at her for a long moment before replying. Oh, it'll definitely be memorable. Her eyes sparkled, completely unaware. The following morning, the first real crack appeared. I received a message from one of my colleagues, Daniel. Attached was a photo taken at a private yacht party hosted by Michael the previous weekend. In the photo, Opal stood beside Michael, her hand resting delicately on his arm. They were laughing, champagne glasses raised in celebration. She wore the same dress she had claimed was for a business dinner. Daniel's message was simple. Thought you might want to see this. I stared at the image, my hands tightening into fists. The lies weren't just whispered behind my back anymore. She paraded them publicly, confident that I would remain blind. That evening, Opal came home humming softly, dropping her bag by the door. I'm exhausted, she said, slipping off her heels. Long day of meetings. I said nothing, simply, watching her. She eventually noticed my silence and glanced at me curiously. Everything okay? She asked. I nodded. Fine. But inside, I was no longer fighting confusion or heartbreak. I was simply waiting, letting her weave the final strands of her web before cutting her free completely. 2 days later, she crossed another line. While preparing breakfast, I overheard a call from the living room. Opal's voice floated into the kitchen, soft and sweet. Michael, I told you, just a little longer. Once everything is settled, we'll figure it out. Thomas is harmless. He won't suspect anything. There it was. The confirmation I hadn't needed but still burned hearing. I stood frozen for a moment, allowing her words to settle deep into my mind. My heart no longer pounded in pain. Instead, a cold detachment replaced every remaining ounce of affection. When she ended the call and walked into the kitchen, her smile was bright as always. Morning, she said, kissing my cheek. You're quiet again. I smiled back faintly. Just thinking about the future. Her face lit up, misinterpreting my words as hope. Well, that makes both of us. But in my version of the future, she was no longer part of the picture. The days that followed were heavier than I had imagined. Even after hearing everything, even after confirming her betrayal, some part of me still searched for reasons to hesitate. I had given her years of my life. It wasn't easy to erase all that overnight. At night, I lay beside her in silence, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully. She'd curl into me, murmuring sweet words in her sleep, completely unaware of the storm building inside my chest. Each breath she took sounded like mockery. My mind spun relentlessly. The memories we'd built replayed on a loop, but they no longer brought warmth. They only reminded me of how carefully she had rehearsed every lie. The weekend getaways, the anniversaries, the whispered promises. None of it had ever been real. I questioned myself endlessly. Was I foolish for not noticing sooner? Or had I chosen to ignore the warning signs because I wanted to believe in something that never truly existed? The shame of my own blind trust burned hotter than her betrayal. Bailey sensed my restlessness. On most nights, he would quietly jump up onto the bed, pressing his warm body against my side as if to anchor me. His silent loyalty reminded me that not every relationship was transactional, not every bond was conditional. During the day, I kept my composure. We continued our routines as if nothing had changed. I took her to dinners, responded to her texts, even listened as she talked about her future plans she was building around Michael, though she never said his name aloud in my presence. The charade was exhausting, but necessary. Every time she mentioned our future, her words sounded hollow. She spoke of homes we could purchase together, vacations we would take, investments we could make as a couple. I nodded through it, all hiding the bitterness that clawed at my throat. The most painful part was the realization that she was never afraid of losing me. She was certain I would always stay. That confidence stabbed deeper than any lie she could tell. In her mind, I was a backup plan who would wait patiently while she decided whether Michael could offer more. I began noticing every little detail I had once overlooked. The way she smiled when Michael's name came up casually in conversations. The spark in her eyes when she spoke about his accomplishments. The way she absent-mindedly scrolled through photos, pausing just a little longer on the ones where they stood too close. Each observation chipped away at the remnants of what I once felt for her. Even my parents noticed something was off. "Thomas, you seem distant lately," my mother said during our weekly call. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just busy." She hesitated, sensing the dishonesty, but let it go. At work, I buried myself in projects, welcoming the distraction. My colleagues saw it as ambition, but for me it was survival, an attempt to drown out the thoughts threatening to consume me. Nights were worse. The silence amplified everything. I would often find myself standing at the balcony, staring into the city lights, wondering how long I could endure this act. There were moments I almost confronted her. Moments when I wanted to demand the truth, to force her to admit what she was doing. But each time I held back. Not because I feared her lies, but because I wanted her to believe she still had control. The more she thought she was winning, the greater the fall would be when I finally let everything unravel. Bailey became my only source of calm. Late at night, I'd sit on the living room floor with him curled beside me. His simple presence reminded me of what loyalty actually looked like, silent, pure, and without conditions. As our anniversary approached, her excitement grew. She became more affectionate, more attentive, as if rehearsing for some grand performance. Every smile she offered felt like another carefully placed brick in the wall of her deception. Inside me, however, there was only a cold, growing emptiness. The love I once had for her was already dead. All that remained now was the quiet countdown to the moment I would let her see what she had truly lost. 2 days before the anniversary, the next fracture appeared. My phone buzzed early in the morning, a message from a private investigator I had quietly hired weeks ago. Attached were several photographs. Opal and Michael at a luxury penthouse, the two of them laughing as they stepped into the private elevator. Another image showed her hand interlocked with his as they exited a hidden back entrance to avoid attention. The timestamp left no room for misunderstanding. It was the same night she had claimed she was at a networking dinner for my sake. I stared at the images for a long time, my jaw tightening. The confirmation was absolute now. She wasn't just playing both sides. She had fully committed herself to him while keeping me as her insurance policy. Later that afternoon, as if nothing had happened, she texted me sweetly. "Don't forget, 2 days till the big day," she wrote, ending it with a heart. I responded simply, "Wouldn't miss it." That evening, as we sat on the couch, she rested her head against my shoulder. "Thomas, you've been a little distant lately," she said softly. "Everything okay at work?" "Everything's fine," I replied, my voice calm. She reached for my hand, her fingers tracing my knuckles. "You know, I've been thinking. Once Michael finalizes the deal he's working on, he might be able to invest in your firm. He said he'd be open to exploring options." Her words struck like a blade. So that's how far she was taking it. She wasn't just choosing Michael romantically. She was plotting to merge him into my professional life, intertwining her betrayal with my career. "Really?" I said, forcing a neutral tone. "Yes," she smiled. "He admires your work, you know. This could be huge for both of us." I stared at her carefully, studying the way her eyes sparkled with calculation. She believed she was orchestrating everything perfectly. In her mind, I was still too naive to notice. She was planning to transition seamlessly, keeping me useful while securing Michael's future position. What she didn't realize was that everything she was building was already collapsing under her feet. By the time she excused herself to take another one of her late-night calls, I sat in the darkened living room, my mind sharper than ever. The time for patience was nearly over. The stage was almost set. The day of the anniversary arrived like the final act of a carefully staged play. Opal had been radiant all morning. She hummed softly as she prepared, moving through the apartment, with excitement she could barely contain. She had made reservations at one of the city's most exclusive rooftop restaurants. She spoke of a special evening, of memories we would cherish for years. Her eyes glittered with satisfaction, believing everything was still perfectly under her control. "You'll love the view tonight, Thomas," she whispered, adjusting her earrings in the mirror. "It's breathtaking." I nodded, offering the same gentle smile I had worn for weeks. "I'm looking forward to it." As we stepped into the private elevator at the restaurant that evening, I watched her closely. Every detail of her appearance was calculated: her silk dress, the diamond necklace I had gifted her on our second anniversary, the crimson lipstick she knew I favored. She had prepared herself like a queen presenting to her loyal subject, Cray. Arrived at the rooftop, where a private table waited under soft lights in an open night sky. The entire city sparkled beneath us. She clutched my arm, leading me toward the table with practiced grace. "I wanted tonight to feel different," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "We've been through so much together." I simply pulled out her chair, allowing her to sit. Dinner proceeded with forced ease. She spoke animatedly about our future, of homes we would buy, places we would travel, businesses we would build. She painted a vivid fantasy while carefully avoiding any mention of Michael. Her performance was flawless. When dessert arrived, she reached across the table, taking my hand gently. "Thomas," she began, her voice lowering into something intimate. "I've been thinking, I don't want to wait anymore." I met her gaze without flinching. "Wait for what?" "For us to move forward," she said, squeezing my hand. "You've been so patient, and I realize now how much you mean to me. I want us to make things official. Marriage, family, everything." I allowed a brief pause before answering. "Are you sure?" Her smile widened. "More than ever." For a moment, silence settled between us. The soft hum of the city was the only sound as she waited for my response. I slowly pulled my hand from hers and leaned back. "You know, Opal," I said calmly, "there was a time when hearing you say those words would have meant everything to me." Her smile faltered slightly, confusion creeping into her expression. "But now, hearing them only makes me wonder, what changed? Or rather, who changed? Your mind?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I continued, my voice steady. "Was it Michael?" The color drained from her face in an instant. She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand. "No need to deny it. I know everything. The private island, the penthouse meetings, the late-night calls. I know." Her eyes darted, looking for an escape, for some line of defense. "Thomas, it's not what you think. Michael is just—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't insult me further." She froze, her breath quickening. "All this time I thought you were building a future with me," I said. "I thought we were partners, but you were building something entirely different. You kept me as your safety net while you chased something you thought was better." Her hands trembled now, resting on the edge of the table. "I was never just a placeholder, Opal," I whispered. "But you made me one." Tears filled her eyes. I was confused. I made mistakes. But I love you, Thomas. I never stopped loving you." I stared at her, feeling nothing. "You love security. You love control. You love comfort. But you don't love me." She reached for my hand again, but I pulled away. Her voice broke. "Thomas, please. We can fix this. I ended things with Michael." I let out a quiet laugh, devoid of humor. "No, Opal. Michael ended things with you." Her eyes widened in horror. "How do you—" "I spoke to him," I revealed. "Or rather, he came to me after realizing you'd been feeding both of us different versions of the same story." Her face paled completely now, lips quivering as she struggled to speak. "I told you I was thinking about the future," I said softly. "That future doesn't include you." "Thomas." Her voice was barely a whisper, desperate, breaking. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "I already changed my will. I removed your name. Bailey is my sole beneficiary now." She gasped, covering her mouth with a shaking hand. I was never your safety net, Opal. You were mine. I stood from the table, placing my napkin gently beside my untouched dessert. Enjoy the rest of your evening. As I turned to leave, her chair scraped against the floor. She stumbled. After me grabbing my arm, "Thomas, please," she begged, tears falling freely now. "I'll do anything. Don't leave me like this." I looked at her one last time. "You left me long before tonight. I'm simply returning the favor." She fell to her knees right there on the rooftop, her sobs echoing through the night air as the other diners turned to stare. Her perfectly constructed world crumbled publicly, just as she had gambled it never would. I walked away, feeling the weight of years lift from my chest with each step. The cold night air no longer bit against my skin. It felt clean, free. The days after that rooftop evening unfolded exactly as I anticipated. Opal tried calling, texting, emailing, her desperate messages flooding my phone day and night. She begged for a chance to explain, to meet, to repair what she so carelessly shattered. But I remained silent. The only answer she received was my absence. Bailey, as always, stayed faithfully by my side, sensing my peace had finally returned. It wasn't long before the consequences of her choices came crashing down on her. Word of her public meltdown at one of the city's most prestigious restaurants spread quickly among the social circles she once carefully manipulated. Gossip spread like wildfire. Her image as a poised, successful woman was tainted beyond repair. The core business connections she valued so dearly began distancing themselves. Clients pulled out of deals. Invitations to exclusive events stopped arriving. The carefully curated facade she spent years building collapsed under the weight of her own recklessness. Michael made no effort to offer her a second chance. After learning of her duplicity, he severed all ties swiftly and publicly. He even sold the penthouse they once shared meetings in, as if erasing every trace of her presence from his world. One evening, nearly a month after that rooftop confrontation, I returned home to find Opal standing outside my apartment building. She looked hollow, thinner, exhausted, and far removed from the confident woman who once controlled every room she entered. Her eyes were swollen from sleepless nights, her once pristine hair tangled under the dim streetlight. "Thomas," she pleaded as I approached, "please, I've lost everything. Just give me a few minutes." I stood still, staring at her without emotion. The version of her that stood before me was no longer a threat, no longer the calculating woman who played with hearts like chess pieces. She was a ghost, clinging to something already long gone. "There's nothing left to say, Opal." She took a step forward, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. I know I made mistakes." "You didn't make mistakes," I interrupted calmly. "You made choices, and choices come with consequences." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought Michael could give me something better. I was wrong. I was stupid. But I never stopped loving you." I studied her face, the desperation written across every line. The irony was poetic. All the power she once held was gone, and she finally realized the cost. "You didn't love me," I said coldly. "You loved what I could offer you, and when you thought something shinier came along, you gambled everything for it." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "Thomas, please, I'm begging." "You," I shook my head. "I'm not the man you once knew. That man doesn't exist anymore." Her tears streamed freely now. "I'll do anything. Anything to prove it to you." I paused, letting her words hang in the cold night air before delivering my final blow. "You already did everything, Opal. You proved exactly who you are." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "So this is it?" "This is closure," I replied. "There's nothing left for you here." Her shoulders shook as silent sobs overtook her body, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just the finality of a closed chapter. I turned away, walking toward the entrance. The heavy glass doors slid open, and as I stepped inside, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. Opal remained frozen on the sidewalk, broken and defeated. Behind those doors, peace awaited me. The months that followed were calm and steady. My work flourished, my partnerships expanded, and most importantly, my circle grew stronger, built, with people I could trust. Bailey remained my ever-loyal companion, always greeting me with joy at the end of every long day. His presence served as a constant reminder of what loyalty truly meant. It was only fitting that he stood as the sole beneficiary in my updated will, a symbol of unwavering devotion in a world filled with calculated intentions. Then, unexpectedly, life offered something I hadn't been searching for. Mary. We met at a charity function. She wasn't like Opal. There was no grand entrance, no game of calculated charm. Instead, Mary's kindness was quiet, steady, and genuine. Her laughter was warm, not rehearsed. Conversations with her felt effortless, like breathing. Over time, something real blossomed between us. No manipulation, no doubt. Just sincerity. One evening, as we walked through the park with Bailey trotting ahead, Mary slipped her hand into mine and smiled. "You seem lighter these days," she said, softly. I glanced at her, feeling the truth of her words. "Because I am." "Do you ever think about her?" she asked gently, not out of jealousy but curiosity. "Not anymore," I replied honestly. "Some people aren't meant to stay in your life. They're just there to teach you what you'll never accept again." She nodded, understanding without judgment. That was what made Mary different. She never tried to control my emotions, never forced herself into spaces that weren't hers. She simply stood beside me, steady and constant. As weeks turned into months, our relationship deepened. My friends noticed the difference. My family, too, quickly embraced her. Even Bailey took to her almost immediately, as if recognizing the purity in her heart. Eventually, I knew. One quiet evening, under a sky filled with stars, I slipped a small velvet box from my jacket pocket and knelt before her. Mary gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Thomas," I smiled. "I don't have a long speech. I just know that I don't want to spend another day without you." Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes." The months of chaos, the heartbreak, the betrayal, all of it led me here, to a peace I never thought I'd find again. On our wedding day, I stood beneath the soft glow of the ceremony lights, watching Mary walk toward me, her smile steady, her eyes filled with nothing but love. My parents beamed from their seats. Bailey sat calmly at my feet, tail wagging gently. As she reached my side, she whispered, "You deserve every happiness, Thomas." I squeezed her hand, my voice steady, "And I intend to protect it." Somewhere out there, Opal still lived in the ruins of her choices, no doubt haunted by what she lost. But she was no longer part of my world. In the end, she lost everything. I, on the other hand, gained everything I was truly meant to have.